Thank you for the awesome support on Patreon, Jesus Ferro. Utilitarianism. The idea that the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people is the correct ethical choice. Now, there are a few problems with this as a form of morality, but this isn't a philosophy channel, so I won't be getting into that here. Instead, I had to ask, what about utilitarianism when it comes to pushing professional wrestlers? Because there are plenty of people who feel that pushing as much as you can is the correct strategy when it comes to booking. Too bad for them that a lot of people, both fans and bookers alike, have forgotten all about this. So I figure why not give a reminder by making this very mentality the topic of an episode. Because today, Dave knows getting over as much as possible. Alright, now this is a classic way of thinking that doesn't always get applied like it should, and unlike a lot of creative woes, management isn't the only one to blame, as there are many fans who also need to subscribe to this exact philosophy as well. And while this does sound like common sense, you'll be surprised when you look at certain things and see how often a lot of people believe that pushing just one person is a good idea. Now look, again, this is just something that I feel is important and is the best way to book. Not everyone has to agree, and I also realize that you can't book this way in all cases, and sometimes it's actually in your best interest not to. But nevertheless, I also feel that it's fallen out of fashion way more than it should have, and I think in the vast majority of cases, you are better off trying to get as much over as you possibly can. And while this may merely be my own opinion, I do have some examples from wrestling history to back up my points. So in the name of utilitarian booking, in this episode, I'm going to be giving some examples of where I think this mentality was done right and when I thought it was sorely needed the most. And to start, we might as well tackle one of the biggest all-time complaints here on this channel. Dating back to an old video of mine where I gave my top 10 favorite mic workers of all time, one thing that I constantly read in the comments section, even to this day, is people complaining that I dare to put The Rock all the way down at number 10. Yeah, somehow people feel the need to try and say that I got my own opinion wrong. Go figure. Anyway, let's finally address this issue that has caused so many people to cry in the comments section. But remember, I still like The Rock, I still think he's charismatic, and he still made the list, so don't be one of those internet people who think that if I say just one negative thing, then I'm 100% against something. This channel is for more intelligent people who can understand nuance and can have complex thoughts. Okay, so back to The Rock. The reason why I didn't rank him higher is that as electrifying as he was on the mic, he mostly succeeded in just getting himself over. Now, yes, taking verbal dumps on people was very funny, and it did make a lot of money for WWE, and it also worked to get him to become the biggest star in Hollywood. I'm not disputing any of that. But my problem is that he did his fair share of mic burying to get there. Remember Billy Gunn, or should I say that it doesn't matter what his name is? Or how about The Rock's feud with Al Snow? While it was immensely popular, and remember I did enjoy it myself to a degree, The Rock's mic skills did come at a cost, and it was a cost that was paid by many others and not by The Rock himself. Yes, Rocky Maivia did put plenty of people over by losing to them, even if he did cut them down verbally, and I'm not saying that he never put anyone over on the mic either. I'm just saying that I think he could have done a lot less linguistic avalanching, as it would have been in the best interest of many. Now, you could make the argument to look at wrestlers like Chris Jericho, Triple H, and Mick Foley, all of whom came out of feuds with The Rock at a higher place than they went into it. And you could even see that getting exposure by working a program with Dwayne Johnson was an opportunity and not a dismissal. And therefore, some might even say that anyone who fails to get over after being in a feud with the Great One only has themselves to blame, and they should have just been better. However, I don't think that's fully accurate. Sure, some talents can survive a tongue lashing at the hands of the People's Champion, but I don't think that everyone should have to, as I think it's unfair to ask that of a wrestler. And besides, not humiliating talent and getting more people over leads to having more people over. And more over talent means more draws, more merch sales, and more wrestlers with a higher profile to get invested in. Not to mention that a browbeating from The Rock can be more detrimental than it may initially seem. Let's not forget about when The Rock pretended to not know who the 5-time WCW champion Booker T was. This caused Sting to not join the WWE because he viewed it as a signal of how poorly former WCW talent would be treated upon entering the House of McMahon, which caused all of us from getting Sting in WWE a lot sooner. Think about it, we all could have gotten Sting versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 18 if The Rock just knew Booker T's role and shut his own mouth. But okay, so what's the solution here? Well, speaking of WCW, there's a more old school way of thinking when it comes to mic work. One that was traditionally more at home in companies that were not WWE, even during the 90s boom. And that's not completely burying your opponents on the microphone. Because if you say that you're facing a worthless nothing and you win, then well, who'd you beat? And on the other hand, if you lose, then you just lost to a complete nothing. The thinking here is that by respecting and putting your opponent over in your promo, you will put yourself over when you win or protect yourself if you lose. Now, of course, you can't just book a promo singing the praises of your opposition. It is a wrestling match after all and not a mutual admiration society meeting. But that's where the actual skill is involved. Being able to talk smack while still adding value to your opponent. Not easy to do, but if you can pull it off, then as far as I'm concerned, you have one major mic plus over the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. But moving forward, this issue doesn't apply to only wrestlers, as both managers and commentators have the power to elevate and devalue talent. And there were definitely some non-wrestling personnel who were better at getting themselves over than they were others, which definitely shouldn't be the case, as one of the most essential factors of commentary and being a manager is to get other people over. This is one of the reasons why I personally always preferred Bobby the Brain Heenan over Jesse the Body Ventura. Like The Rock, Jesse is very talented with the talking, and he did manage to get himself a career outside of wrestling as an actor, and also as a politician. However, Jesse also mostly made himself look good, and often at the expense of others. But Bobby the Brain Heenan, on the other hand, was not just good at slinging insults, he was also really good at finding a way to promote other talent in the process. The Brain, would talk about the opposition's accomplishments or point out how they've been a very long-reigning champion, and then follow that up by talking about why his client is even better. The Brain was also good at bringing up additional wrestlers in his promos too, name-dropping others even if they weren't currently involved in a match against any of the members of the Heenan family, especially if they had a title. As an example, Bobby would sometimes mention things like, after his client scores an impressive victory tonight, President Jack Tunney will have no choice but to give his client a title shot against the champion. It was small comments like these which helped to give other talents the rub, making the promo about more than just one competitor, more than just being about two competitors, making it clear that this match doesn't live in a vacuum and that it was part of a larger picture. By doing this, not only did Bobby push multiple talents, but he also promoted the championships themselves, making it clear that the belt itself was a goal, endorsing not just the current title holder, but also the idea that the title was something worth holding. And during the Heenan family's heyday in the WWF, there was one champion that often got brought up. Of course, I'm talking about Hulk Hogan. Because I do think that the Brain played a fair part in promoting the Hulkster, even as adversaries. By mentioning his vendetta against Hulk Hogan or that the Heenan family were coming for his title, it helped to plug Hogan without needing the Hulkster to even be on screen. Now, don't think that Bobby was the only one to do this. As Attitude Era fans may recall, Jim Ross played an important role in pushing a lot of stars of the time. The excitement in his voice and his ability to make wrestlers sound like they were really big deals did work to get them over with fans. And this philosophy works for more than just promos and commentary, since I really think it's an important practice for booking overall. Now fine, sometimes it is necessary, and I think it's okay with jobbers, and there are occasional squash matches that I have enjoyed, and it can even be part of a compelling narrative if used correctly. But for the most part, it can seriously damage people's perceptions of a wrestler, and sometimes in ways that they can never fully recover from, thus only making one person look good when you could have used the opportunity to benefit multiple parties. And yes, in a match, usually someone has to lose, but there is a concept known as making an opponent look strong in defeat, where a wrestler can still come across as respectable even if they didn't win. Now, I could go in depth about this topic, but I think that particular booking strategy is best saved for another episode of its own. Moving on, let's look at one of the most infamous examples of where many will say that the utilitarian thinking was most needed: SummerSlam 2010. As many people had a problem with the way John Cena Supermaned his way to victory, leaving an outcome that only benefited Cena and no one else, leaving the entire Nexus team looking weak as a result. And if the Nexus came out on top, then we could have gotten an entire stable looking strong. Meanwhile, Cena's stock wouldn't have been all that damaged if you ask me, since I think he was actually less over as a result of winning that match. But also, just like the problems that come with utilitarian ethics, there are a few things other than just quantity to consider, like the age of WWE's team. Since most of them, except Daniel Bryan, were more established and Brett was just making a cameo, they had far less to benefit from winning against a team of newcomers than the new talent of the Nexus would get from defeating a team of mostly veterans. Because a significant part of this equation is, when we look at who gets the score to win, we have to consider who has the most equity, who could stand to lose, and who can't. We have to ask ourselves, how can we maximize the potential for the outcome of this match to result in getting the most amount of good? Well, there you have it, my thoughts on utilitarian booking. But what are some examples that you could think of where multiple wrestlers could have been made to look good but didn't? Let me know down in the comments. And don't forget to support this channel over on Patreon, just like Jesus Pharaoh. Thanks so much for the support, and as always, Dave knows.